Hello everybody, thank you for clicking on the video. As always for these tutorials, I'll make sure to link the code down below in the description. Let's start off with an example. Say you have two lists, one called people and one called ages, and you want to connect these lists somehow. Well, one way of doing it would be using the Python built-in map function, which is a built-in Python function. Now, I'll just quickly save this, but what you have to do is the map function takes in either one or multiple lists, like in this case, and as its first parameter it takes in some function which is used to quote-unquote map the lists, or map the single list. Now, you may not understand what I mean by this, but this example will show you what I mean. So, in this specific case, this lambda function, which if you're not familiar with lambda functions, I will make a tutorial on them specifically, but quickly for this example, what you need to know is a lambda function is a single line function, and it takes in its parameters here, which in this case is a person and an age, and then after the colon, this is its return value. So, in this case, the return value is a list containing the person and the age. So, if we have a look what would happen for the first item of this map function is, well, the first item for this map function would be Fraser, because it would be people index 0, and it will be 16 because it will be ages index 0. So what we will pass into this lambda function is Fraser and 16. So the result will be a list containing Fraser and 16. Great, so I'll just print this out. So I've saved it, and if I run it, I now get a list containing other lists, and these lists contain a single person and a single age. So in this case it's Fraser 16, Bob 29 and Alice 43. Great. One thing I didn't mention is that I have to cast it to a list afterwards, because otherwise this thing by itself is just a map object, which wouldn't be useful if we were to just print it out, because all it says is it's a map object and it says what memory address it's at, which is great, but that's not what we're looking for, so you have to cast it to a list. Okay, so for the second example, let's suppose we have a list of squares, and if you see, I've generated a list of squares. This is, if you're not familiar with this structure, it's list comprehension. And if you don't know what list comprehension is, I actually have a YouTube video explaining it, so I'll link that in the description. Right, so what you do is you have a list comprehension generating squares from 0 to 14, and then if I print those squares out, then I should just get, I get this. I get 0, 1, 4, 9, 16, etc, etc. That's great, but say I wanted to map this list to the rooted values, i.e. the original values, right? So with using map, what I can do is I can create this bit of code, and what I can do is I can say the rooted values is equal to whatever the square values is, and you pass these square values into your map function, or the function that you want to map the values with, and in this case it's casting it to an integer, and also it's square rooting it, because raising something to the power of a half is the same as square rooting it. Now, the reason I cast it to an integer is because in Python, if you raise something to the power of a half by default, or any decimal value by default, the number will be a decimal value or a float. So if I print out these rooted numbers, we should get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So if I run this, that's exactly what we get, because all it does is it takes in this list of squares and square roots each one of them and appends it to this new rooted nums list, and then when we print it, this is what we get. So that's great. Now let's have a look at filter. Filter is a bit like map in the sense that it's got a similar layout. So if I move this over here and I go enter, great, so you can see it. So in this second example, let's suppose we have test scores in a list, and we want to filter this list so we can only append the passing test scores. Now in this example, what you do, like map, filter takes in a list or lists that you want to apply it to, and the function that you want to apply it to. So what this does is it will only append the test scores which meet this value, because if you look at the first test score, for example, you'll get 52. So because test scores index 0 is 52, so 52 is passed in here, and 52 is greater than or equal to 50. Therefore 52 is is filtered and appended to the new passing scores list. However, values 17 and 20 aren't greater than or equal to 50, so they won't be put in the new passing scores list. So, so if I just put this over here and format my screen and I run this code, now what you can see, I didn't print this, whoops. So if I just quickly print out the passing scores, because I forgot to print them, that's why you aren't getting anything. If I now print out these passing scores, you can see I've got a list containing the 2 passing scores, and the other 2 items in the list have been filtered, so they're not in the new list. Let's have a look at an example of zip. So zip is another Python function which is built in, and this is the example I'll show to explain it. So in this case, say you want to link people and ages again. Earlier in the video I mentioned that doing this on line 4 was only one specific way of doing it, and there are multiple ways of doing this. On line 22, which is this, I actually prefer this method because it's much simpler, but zip is very much like map, or it's more of a specific case of map, because, well, I'll run the code and I'll show you what happens. But what we should expect is a list of tuples, or tuples, and that's exactly what we get. As you can see, it's almost identical to the first line. The only difference is now it's a list of tuples. But if I were to change this to these square brackets to curved brackets, in a previous video I called these curly brackets by mistake, but if I were to switch this to curved brackets, now the first and final lines will be exactly the same. So zip is a more, I guess, specific way of this map way. Now, finally, one more example for zip. So, the main reason, or the main way I use zip is to iterate over more than one list at once. So in this case, it's much easier to do this because you can just do full person, comma, age in zip people ages. You can do person and age, and then if I just run this, you'll see that this is much simpler, because what this now does is it'll go Fraser is 16, Bob is 29, and Alice is 43. Years old, years old, years old. I forgot to say that bit. This is just using an F string or formatted string. I haven't made a tutorial on these, but I might do in the future. If I do, I'll link it in the description. But all it does is it allows us to put these in here, so whatever person is will be created in the string. And you can see how that works, because for the first iteration, person will be Fraser and age will be 16. And as you can see, Fraser is passed in here and age and 16 is passed in here. Now, as you can tell, both map and filter and also zip are both really useful in Python. I hope you found this video useful. There is one more thing called reduce, but that's actually part of the functools library, and I plan on making a full video on how functools work. So if you liked this video, please subscribe, please like the video, leave a comment if you have any questions. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.